Whether you've only just recently gotten into anime or have been watching it since you were a child like I was, there's a high chance that you've definitely at least heard of this show called Naruto. It's without a doubt the most iconic anime series to have ever been created aside from Dragon Ball. You don't have to like anime in order to know this show. I've met people who have no idea what anime even is, but have seen every episode of Naruto. That's how influential this series is. Now, as for me, I was a really big fan of Naruto when I was a kid. I was significantly stupid as a child, so I couldn't really understand much of the story, but I enjoyed it because there were dudes with spiky hair yelling and fighting each other, and that reminded me of Dragon Ball, which I loved at the time. Of course, as I got older, I came to understand more and more of the stuff that was going on after I rewatched it, but me getting smarter was also the thing that made me stop watching it. I'm not going to tell you that Naruto is the worst anime to ever exist. Heck, it's far from even being the worst shonen, but Shippuden really started taking its toll on me after the Pain Saga, and I eventually just dropped the series entirely after Guy was robbed of his victory against Madara. That was fucking bullshit. After that, I sort of just grew a bitter distaste towards the franchise because I literally stopped watching it with a bad impression of it, and I saw how cancerous the fandom got, as most long-running shonen fandoms do.
Some of you guys linked me a Filthy Frank video basically making fun of us Naruto fans, and he's a little piece of shit, and he needs to be eradicated from the internet. Like, the YouTube community needs to get together and fucking destroy.
All these factors mixed together made me develop some distorted image about the show that made me resent it. I hated Naruto at one point and would take any opportunity I got to clown on it and anybody that liked it. If you want a good idea on how bad it got, I sucked the ever-living shit out of My Hero Academia's dick when it first came out, just so I can call it a better version of Naruto.
Got a feeling that I'm going under, but I know that I'll make it out alive if I keep calling you my lover and move on. You watch me bleed until I can't breathe. I'm shaking, falling on my.
That was how much I had grown to despise it, and the existence of Boruto was not helping in the slightest. At that point, I just saw Naruto as a really stupid and immature phase in my life. Just a dumb little kid show that I loved at the time because I was a dumb little child. I didn't just dislike it, I was embarrassed that I had once liked it. At least until one particular day arrived. It was around the middle of September 2020. The world had been on lockdown for God knows how long at that point, and my sanity was slowly drifting away. I mean, you can only play so much video games until you eventually get sick of them. Don't even get me started on the animes that were airing at the time, because I legitimately would prefer sniffing glue than watch any of those shitty shows. So I'm honestly very sad I still wasted my life watching them. The point is, I was completely fucking dry of entertainment. I wasn't attending university yet at the time, so I was basically just a shut-in who had gotten sick of being confined to my room for so long. And then a random thought came to my mind. What if I rewatched Naruto? Not Boruto, not Shippuden, the OG series that I was practically obsessed with as a kid. I shrugged off the idea at first, but ultimately decided to give it a go because why the hell not? I went in with the mindset of just watching the first couple of episodes. I knew I wasn't going to enjoy myself, and this was just going to be a small little activity to have a little chuckle at my taste as a kid, and maybe I'll make a video about it afterwards. I booted up the first 2 episodes, watched through the whole thing, and I thought, damn, that was pretty good. But it must have been a fluke, right? There's no way there's actual substance to this show. I'm sure I'll be reminded on why I hated it so much if I keep going just a little bit further. So I did. And I went from planning to watch just a couple of episodes to watching the entire series until the end of the Sasuke rescue arc. I was genuinely surprised at the level of quality the series was at in terms of plot development, world building, and most importantly, character writing. There were so many really good moments, so many well thought out and fleshed out concepts that are executed in such a compelling way. The entire experience had served to not only rekindle my love for the series, but also make me appreciate and respect it more than ever before. As you can clearly see from my previous videos, as I've been using Naruto as a staple for good writing, and I wanted to talk about it with more depth. Let's start from the beginning. If you've somehow never seen Naruto before, it follows the journey of a young man by the name of, well, Naruto. Now, Naruto is an incredibly loud, arrogant, and very obnoxious brat that is seen as nothing but a nuisance for the people around him, specifically the adults of the village. At first, their distaste towards him seemed rather justified, as the very first thing we see him do is run away from his teachers after he graffitied all over the Hokage statue, a monument so important that what he did was equivalent to violating Mount Rushmore. I assume. I'm not American. I don't actually know how much you people value that monument. It only gets worse when he starts mocking them for getting so mad at his oh-so-harmless prank, and even snaps back at them once he's caught and made to take responsibility for his actions. Something this generation of children might learn from.
Chloe, you can't keep blaming me and everybody for everything wrong in your life. It's so not fair.
I gotta blame somebody, otherwise it's all my fault. Fuck that.
He was overall just a really unpleasant kid who had his head so far up his ass you'd think it was Excalibur. But much like how Rudeus from Mushoku Tensei started out as a piece of shit, this behavior he displays is very much intentional on the writer's part. As you continue watching the first episode, you find out that Naruto is actually disliked by nearly the entire village. Not because of his behavior, but because of simply existing. And his current attitude is simply a result of constant ridicule he received from everyone around him. And this is not just a throwaway note in the episode, you see throughout a lot of the early episodes how unfairly almost everyone treats him. Quite a lot of them are played off for laughs, but when you actually take the situation into consideration, it's actually pretty sad. I mean, this dude developed an addiction to instant noodles because he couldn't get any other food. A lot of the restaurants refused to serve him, and he was alone since he was an infant, so he doesn't know how to cook. Naruto is just a kid. He was literally only 12 years old at the start of the series. I could barely handle getting teased by 3 or 4 people at that age. So when you take into account that he had to deal with majority of the population looking at him as if he was actually Satan, all the way from when he was an infant, you suddenly start to feel sorrier for him. Eventually you start to realize that he's not an insufferable little shit for no reason. It was just a kid who didn't know any better, acting out of line because he'd rather be seen as an annoyance than be forgotten. And since I'm already on the topic, Naruto himself is really great as a character. Seeing him go from a pitiful and self-centered runt to a much more considerate and openly nice person because he eventually starts to find people who are willing to give him a chance was a really satisfying experience. A good example of this would be nearing the end of the Hidden Mist arc when Naruto was yelling his lungs out to Zabuza, who refused to show any empathy towards Haku's death. This was Naruto's first real taste on the harshness of the ninja world. Kakashi had sort of lectured the entire team on the seriousness of the occupation before this, but there's a difference between being told about it and actually experiencing it. Throughout this entire sequence, Naruto berates the hell out of him, calling him a cold-blooded monster, a scum beyond belief, but he follows it up by acknowledging Zabuza's strength, and in a fit of tears, questions if he was going to become a monster like him if he ever became that strong. A lot of people might call this a cheap emotional moment, and that Naruto is being incredibly naive, but he's not. You have to understand this is probably the first time he ever saw someone truly die in front of him, and in a brutal way no less. Naruto is finally understanding the harshness of the job that he has taken up, and it scares him. Not just the brutality of the whole ordeal, but how it might change him as a person. Zabuza and Haku were one of the best antagonists in the entire series. They had so much influence on Naruto's growth as a character, and I fucking hate how they were eventually just forgotten. This entire scene was a result of not just good character development, but also proper plot development and world building. Because if we hadn't gotten to know Zabuza and Haku, the emotional weight would not be as emotional as it was. And if we hadn't already been shown how dangerous the ninja world was, this whole sequence would have been just a huge tonal whiplash. And that's another thing I want to touch on. The world building on the early parts of Naruto were so freaking good. I think one of the most iconic fights of the original series was the Gaara vs Rock Lee fight, and right when Gaara was about to kill Lee, Guy jumps in to save him. At this point in the show, Gaara had only been shown to be a bloodthirsty killing machine who was way stronger than anyone his age, so seeing Guy jump headfirst into his attack and brush it off like nothing is absolutely nutty. It does so little, yet accomplish so much in enforcing the power system as it shows just how different a Genin and Jonin are in terms of strength. There are loads of scenes like this, like Team 7's initiation test with Kakashi when he completely destroys them, or when Ebisu, a man who was introduced as a pretty stupid person, still completely clowns on Naruto during their second encounter, showing that even if this man is comic relief-ish, he is still a Jonin and far stronger than Naruto at this point in time. There's also the chakra system, which, if you've been watching my recent videos, you're probably already fucking sick of me continuing to bring this up, but I really can't sing enough phrases for this. This concept is so incredibly simplistic, but it's so freaking polished and well thought out that it's genuinely sad to see how little the significance of chakra control became in the series. I've already explained it multiple times, but I'll do it once more just for the sake of this video. This will be the last time, I promise. So if you didn't already know, chakra is a spiritual sort of deal. It is elemental life energy that ninjas use for jutsus. It exists in 2 forms: physical energy, which exists within every cell in the body, and spiritual energy, which is developed through training and experience. A ninja requires mastery over both forms in order to perform a jutsu. I've said twice now on this channel that the way to control chakra is through hand signs, and while that is true to a certain extent, it's not exactly that simple, because that would imply that you just need to memorize a bunch of hand signs and you'd automatically be able to perform the jutsu, which is not true at all. Hand signs do play a part, but it's more so used as a method for creating a pathway for chakra to flow. Here's an analogy. Think of chakra as a car, and hand signs are you building a road for the car to travel through. However, you have to actually be able to drive the car in order to follow the road you just just paid for it. Is this making sense to you? The hand signs are building a path, and it is up to you to guide your chakra from within to follow that pathway. Some jutsus are quite straightforward and don't require much control. For example, we learn later on that Naruto actually has terrible chakra control, and that the only reason he's able to perform the multi-shadow clone jutsu is because he has huge chakra reserves, and he just keeps releasing all that energy until it works. He basically brute forced his way through the technique. It's equivalent to not being able to drive a car, but because it's just a straight road, you're able to get to the end just by slamming on the gas and keeping the wheel straight. But not all jutsus are like that, as shown in, again, the Hidden Mist arc, when Kakashi tries to teach the squad how to climb a tree. Due to Naruto and Sasuke only brute forcing their way through performing jutsus up to this point, they struggle to accomplish this, with Naruto not using enough chakra to keep his feet planted, while Sasuke uses too much that it destroys the bark. It is a technique that puts emphasis on control rather than the amount of power. So basically, a road with a lot of twists and turns. Do you see what I mean by how great the chakra system is? It's such a bare bones concept that can be explained in less than a paragraph, but Kishimoto expands on it in so many ways that it's so freaking interesting to learn about. And for the most part, despite all the expansions in the system, it still makes sense and the rules of it aren't broken all that often. In the original series at least. Shippuden probably fucked it up, but I will stand by the original series, goddammit. Now don't get me wrong, it's in no way perfect. The OG series had its fair share of stupidity itself. Like, for the life of me, I don't know what they were going for with the clones. Apparently there's a difference between a normal clone jutsu and shadow clones. Not to mention there are also things like water and earth clones. Like, what's the fucking difference, Kishimoto? I also didn't like how Naruto kind of got away completely scot-free despite stealing the sacred scroll. I'm aware that Mizuki tricked him into doing it, but he still committed a crime, so shouldn't he face some form of consequence? At least give him a slap on the wrist instead of just rewarding him. Like, that's not how the law should work. Hiruzen, for the majority of his screen time, just seems to be a really incompetent leader in all honesty. For a person who was supposed to be the strongest in the village, he did very little to keep things under control. The entirety of the Chunin exam puts his incapability to take any sort of action whatsoever on full display. He is such a passive little bitch. Not just how Orochimaru managed to completely infiltrate the village under his nose, but rehearing Neji's backstory almost actually made me have an aneurysm due to how stupid it is. Imagine you became friends with someone you really hate. You make an agreement to get along better and treat each other nicely. The next day, you catch him rummaging through your stuff in an attempt to rob you. Instead of apologizing, that person gets mad at you for catching them and demand you pay him money as compensation. That is basically Neji's backstory. I'm not gonna get into it too deeply. There's a video by Plague of Gripes on YouTube called Naruto the Self-Made Hypocrite, and he talks about this event with a little more detail. Although I personally disagreed with quite a lot of things in that video, the section where he rips into the Hyuga clan was a part I was 100% in agreement with. It was definitely a part in the story where the politics of the Naruto world just didn't make any sense, and it served to do nothing but make Hiruzen out to be a pushover of a leader, and the Hyuga clan to be a bunch of retards. But despite all these flaws, I genuinely do believe the amount of good outweighs the bad. Naruto is far from a perfect series. It's flawed in many different areas, and I acknowledge that. Hell, I actually still fucking hate Shippuden, and if you're someone who came to dislike the series because of it, then I completely understand. But before you start hating the entire franchise while branding it as the worst shonen to ever exist, why don't you take a step back and look at what made you like it in the first place? Before Jutsus became Dragon Ball Ki Blast, before Kishimoto smoked a fuck ton of coke and made Naruto some destiny child of a prophecy, back to the times when it was just ninjas using their heads with a few techniques here and there. It might not entirely fix the image of the series in your head, but it might serve to relieve a bit of the bitter taste left in your mouth. Shippuden was fucking garbage, but everything until the Sasuke retrieval arc was a solid 8 out of 10, and I will stand by that notion. Give the OG series a rewatch and you might find yourself in for a little surprise. That's all.